They called him Pain, not as an insult, but as his name. His own mother named him that, a constant reminder of suffering, of loss, of a story that began in sorrow. His brothers despised him. They blamed him for everything that went wrong. To them, he wasn't just unwanted, he was a curse. And his future? It looked sealed, limited, broken before it even began. But one day, everything changed. Not because of strength, not because of connections, but because of 4 bold, dangerous words he prayed. And suddenly, what was chasing him began to run. What was small began to expand. What was empty began to overflow. This is the story of how one ordinary man moved heaven. And if heaven could move for him, then heaven can move for you too. Stay with me till the end, because hidden inside this story is a lesson that can completely change your life. In the sun-scorched hills of Judah, where the tribes of Israel had carved their inheritance from the land promised to Abraham, a boy was born under a shadow that would follow him like a storm cloud. The year was one of those ordinary times between judges and kings, when families scratched a living from rocky soil and prayed for rain that sometimes never came. His mother, a strong-willed widow named Mara, had labored for 3 days and 3 nights. The midwives whispered that the child had turned wrong in the womb, twisting her insides like a rope pulled too tight. When the boy finally slid into the world, Mara's scream echoed off the stone walls of their small clay house. She looked down at the wrinkled, crying infant and named him Jabez right then and there. "Because I bore him in pain," she said, her voice cracking. In Hebrew, the name meant "he causes sorrow," and every time someone spoke it, the villagers would nod sadly. "Poor boy," they muttered, "born to trouble." Mara never meant it as a curse, but names have power in the ancient world. They shape the soul before the child can even speak. Jabez grew up hearing his name like a warning bell. The house was crowded. Jabez had 4 older brothers, strong, loud boys who had come easily into the world and now worked the family fields with their father's brothers. They called him Pain when Mara wasn't listening. "Hey, Pain, fetch the water," they would shout, laughing as he ran barefoot over sharp stones. At night, around the low fire, his brothers told stories of great warriors and vast lands, while Jabez sat in the corner, small and quiet, nursing bruises from the day's teasing. His mother tried to shield him. "You are honorable," she would whisper when she tucked him in. "God sees you differently." But even she carried the weight of that birthing pain in her eyes. Years passed like the slow turning of seasons. Jabez became a young man with calloused hands and a heart that refused to grow bitter. While his brothers chased wild goats and dreamed of battles, Jabez stayed behind. He mended broken fences, tended the olive trees with aching patience, and learned the secret rhythm of the soil. The family plot was tiny, just enough rocky acres to feed them if the rains were kind. Neighbors said the land itself seemed to reject them, yielding only thorns and thin grain. Jabez felt it in his bones. Every harvest felt like a reminder of his name. One spring, when locusts blackened the sky and stripped the fields bare, the family nearly starved. Jabez's brothers blamed him. "It's your name," the eldest growled one night, throwing a half-empty bowl of porridge across the room. "You bring sorrow wherever you go." Mara wept in the corner. Jabez said nothing. He simply rose before dawn the next day, took his father's old wooden plow, and walked the empty fields alone. He sang the old songs of Israel under his breath, songs of Abraham's promise, of a land flowing with milk and honey. The words tasted like dust in his mouth. That night, under a sky heavy with stars, Jabez could not sleep. He slipped out of the house and climbed the hill behind their village. The wind carried the scent of wild thyme and distant sheep. He dropped to his knees on the hard ground and stared up at the heavens. For the first time in his life, the words poured out like a river breaking through a dam.
My soul aches for your light. Do not abandon me in this darkness.
"O God of Israel," he cried, his voice raw and trembling, "you who made the stars and the mountains, hear me. I am called Jabez, pain, but I do not want to live as my name. Bless me indeed, enlarge my territory. Let your hand be upon me. Keep me from harm so that I will not cause pain or be caused pain ever again." He stayed there until the sky turned pink with dawn. Tears had carved clean tracks through the dust on his face. When he finally stood, something had shifted inside him. He did not know what, but the air felt lighter, as if heaven itself had leaned down to listen. The change began slowly, like the first green shoots after a long drought. 3 days later, a distant cousin from the tribe of Judah arrived with news. An elderly uncle had died without sons, leaving a fertile valley on the edge of the tribal border, land that had been disputed for years. According to ancient custom, it could pass to the nearest honorable male relative. The cousin looked Jabez up and down. "The elders say you are the most upright among your brothers. The land is yours if you claim it." Jabez's brothers scoffed. "That valley is cursed. Raiders from the Philistines sweep through it every season." But Jabez saw something else. He saw the answer to his prayer taking shape. He packed a small bag, kissed his mother's forehead, and walked the 2-day journey alone. When he arrived, the valley was more beautiful than he had imagined. Wide, green, watered by a clear stream that sparkled like liquid silver. The soil was rich and dark, but the fields lay untended, walls broken, and the shadows of old fear lingered. He worked from sunrise to sunset. With his own hands, he rebuilt stone walls, cleared rocks, and planted barley and wheat. At night, he slept under the open sky, praying the same words again and again. "Bless me, enlarge my borders, your hand upon me." One morning, he woke to the sound of hooves. A band of raiders, 10 rough men on scrawny horses, crested the hill. They had come for easy plunder, as they always had. Jabez stood in the middle of his new field, holding only a wooden staff. His heart hammered, but he remembered his prayer. "God of Israel," he whispered, "keep me from harm." What happened next became legend in the valley. The lead raider raised his spear, but his horse suddenly reared as if struck by lightning. The man tumbled backward into a thorn bush. His companions tried to charge, but their animals bolted in panic.
One by one, the raiders fled without landing a single blow. Jabez stood untouched, the morning sun warm on his face. From that day, the raiders never returned. Word spread. The man called Pain had been protected by heaven itself.
Within a year, the valley flourished. Neighbors from Judah heard the stories and came to help, first out of curiosity, then out of respect. Young men asked to learn from him. Families brought their daughters, hoping for marriages. Jabez's territory grew. He purchased adjacent fields with the first abundant harvest. He dug wells where none had existed. He built a small village of clay houses around his own home. People began calling the place Jabez's portion, and the name no longer meant sorrow. It meant blessing. Back in his old village, his brothers watched from afar with stunned silence. One by one they came, hats in hand, asking for forgiveness. "We were wrong," the eldest admitted, eyes on the ground. "You were never the pain. We were." Jabez embraced them, dividing portions of the new land among them. Mara, now gray-haired and smiling, moved into a fine house beside the stream. She would sit on the porch each evening and tell visitors, "My son cried out to God, and God answered. His name is still Jabez, but now it means joy." The blessings kept unfolding like the petals of a desert flower after rain. Jabez's flocks multiplied, goats, sheep, and even a small herd of cattle that grazed peacefully where jackals once prowled. Merchants from distant cities began trading at his gates, bringing spices, fine cloth, and news of the wider world. He used his new wealth wisely. He built storehouses for the poor during lean years. He taught the children of the valley to read the scrolls of Moses. And every morning, before the sun rose, he climbed the same hill where he had first prayed and thanked the God who had heard a desperate man. One harvest season, a terrible drought gripped all of Judah. Rivers dried to cracked mud. Other villages starved. But in Jabez's valley, the streams still flowed, fed by underground springs he had discovered through prayerful digging. Refugees poured in, hundreds of families from neighboring clans. Jabez opened every granary. "My God enlarged my borders," he told them, "so that I might share the blessing." The people called him Father of the Valley. His influence stretched beyond land and livestock. Tribal elders invited him to settle disputes. Young warriors sought his counsel before battles. Even the priests at the tabernacle in Shiloh heard his name and sent messengers asking for his story. Yet Jabez never forgot where he came from. When strangers asked why God had favored him so greatly, he would sit them under the shade of an ancient olive tree and speak plainly. "I was born in pain and named for it," he would say, voice steady and kind. "But one night I dared to ask the God of my fathers for more than I deserved. I asked him to bless me indeed, not just with bread, but with purpose. I asked for land enough to steward, strength enough to protect it, and a life free from the sorrow that had mocked me. And he who is rich in mercy granted it all." Years turned into decades. Jabez grew old, his beard white as the snow on Mount Hermon, but his eyes still sparkled with the fire of that first prayer. On his last evening, he gathered his children, grandchildren, and the leaders of the valley around his bed. The oil lamp flickered softly. "Remember this," he whispered, voice barely above the rustle of the night wind. "God is not far off. He hears the cry of the ordinary man who dares to ask greatly. Do not let your name or your past define your future.
Cry out to the God of Israel. Ask him to bless you. Ask him to enlarge your borders. Ask for his hand upon you. Ask to be kept from harm. And when he answers, and he will, use every blessing to honor him. As the sun rose the next morning, Jabez closed his eyes for the final time. The entire valley mourned for weeks. They buried him on the hill where he had prayed, and they carved a simple stone. Here lies Jabez, who asked greatly and received greatly. But his story did not end in the ground. It traveled on the lips of storytellers, from campfires in Judah to the courts of future kings. Centuries later, when the scrolls of Chronicles were written, his brief record would remain, only 2 verses in a long list of names. Yet those 2 verses would echo through time, reminding every generation that heaven still listens to bold prayers. And so the man once called Pain became the man whose prayer changed everything. His territory was not merely land, it was a legacy of faith. His blessing was not only prosperity, it was a testimony that no one is too small, too ordinary, or too marked by sorrow for God to notice. In the animated hills of ancient Judah, under skies painted with divine light, one man knelt, one prayer rose, and the God of Israel answered in ways that still shake the world today.